Hello and welcome to Ranked Rambles episode 4, the state of formats. This is going to be a more general discussion here. One thing I was particularly noticed was saw a breakdown of queue player by formats, which showed a very basic breakdown of the current percentage of players on Arena. Now there's data missing from the graph, it doesn't show what the one axis is. But what they're trying to say is, Standard is around 35 to 40% of the players, Historic is 25%, Brawl is 15%, Alchemy is 15%, and Explorer is 5, maybe 6% of their total player base. Now, is there multiple reasons for that? And I think there is, but I wanted to do a quick of a dive in. Obviously, I think Explorer gets hurt a lot by the fact that it's Pioneer Light. It's Pioneer without a few of the missing pieces here. You know, we don't have, I'll obviously always, until I get it, rant about Ring to Light, but there's also all the cards that haven't been added, and the pace at which they're adding them is really slow. The fact that they want to add an entire alchemy set every time is infuriating. But there is something I just wanted to address, is what was concerning to me about this was, surely that number should be going up, or be higher than that, because surely a player should finish playing Standard, or get frustrated with Standard, or maybe even just a little bored with the format and want to switch to something different. That was my progression. I started playing Magic random cards, then I made a fun Standard deck which was just mono red burn. And then I got a little bored of just playing burn in Standard with the same couple of decks, and my friend introduced me to Modern, where I then ironically made a really budget Boros deck, then I made Soul Sisters, but that was my transition. I got a little bored of the Standard format and progressed to an Eternal format, because I also felt better investing in cards. This chart would suggest we're not seeing that kind of migration, and if I'm honest, the main reason I think that is, again, I'm working with incomplete data, so please don't take my word here, this could be completely wrong, but I'm thinking that it might have something to do with the fact that currently, if you play Standard and then try to play Explorer / Pioneer, you're probably still going to run into the same things. You're going to run into a Rakdos deck that runs Shieldred, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, all those good cards, Blood Tithe Harvester. I could see some person getting bored of Standard, wanting to change format, and then running into an identical deck. Also, with the current state of Explorer in particular, it's basically a 2, maybe 3 deck format. You're going to run into Mono Green Devotion, which I have my gripes about. But you can imagine a Standard player stepping in and being like, okay, this guy's just got a Khan and made 600 mana on turn 5 and I'm dead. That's kind of, I remember feeling ironically reminiscent about how my first induction to Modern went. When we started Modern, all my friends and me made budget decks. We made, there was a red-white burn, I made Soul Sisters, my friend made Bogles, and then one of our friends who just also wanted to play Friday Night Magic made a Tron deck, and if that had been my first game of Modern, I don't think I would have continued playing Modern. Which, you know, things aside, people could say that about Control, people could say that about mid-range, people could say that about aggro. But I'm thinking that with the current most played cards matching up pretty well, like Shieldred and Mirror Breaker, if you're going to see Standard, why would you invest to make an Explorer deck if you're just going to play against the same decks? Now there's the argument obviously that, well, if they've made a Shieldred deck in Standard, surely they'll just want to play that in Explorer. Well, the decks don't translate one for one, and also it may also be a thing that maybe they'll want to play a different archetype of deck. Obviously the joke is here with me, I play Niv-Mizzet Reborn in every format to save money on developing multiple different decks and mana bases, but if we look at the numbers, Historic with 25%, Now, there's an argument to be made that Historic is a more established format on Arena because it's been around for several years and it's had several crazier cards put into it. But as you said, if you look at Historic, it's different, it's diverse. It's got the Rakdos Ring deck, which is running away with it, and we do see Shieldred in that. But you've got Is It Wizards, you've got Life Gain Angels, there's all these other crazy fun decks people are trying out. People are playing alchemy cards that people know what to do. That's kind of the excitement that I had looking from Standard to Modern when I first transitioned. It was like, wow, what are all these crazy different cards? What does this do? That's a mechanic? Wow. And I don't think we have, particularly with the restrictions of Arena, a split of that card. Also, for more established players, Pioneer as well has been suffering from a identity crisis, and as well as an Explorer. We've seen Explorer and Pioneer have insane amount of bannings. Ironically, if you look back at some of these bannings, most of them came from the early aggro/devotion decks for black and green. And then we had things like we banned the Saheeli Felidar Guardian combo because that was deemed too powerful. Yes, a turn 4 combo with no interaction was deemed too powerful, but the same thing can still happen with a Rat, Vehicle Pilot, but I won't go fully into that because that's less consistent, they claim, blah blah blah. The other thing was Pioneer took its biggest hit, and I think it's rolled over into Explorer, with the release of Pharos Beyond Death and the printing of Thassa's Oracle, because at that point, Wizards stopped doing their weekly bans that were policing Pioneer, and they let essentially 3 insanely powerful combo decks just dominate the meta. For those who don't remember, it was Dimir Inverter, which exiled your library and used Thassa's Oracle with a control shell. It was not Thassa's Oracle, it was Heliod Suncrown with Walking Ballista that just made infinite damage on the spot. And then basically we got to a point where I know players who literally said, if there's no banning for Pioneer at this point, we'll stop making content. And they did. It was a thriving young podcast on Pioneer that just died because they just got tired of talking about how there was no changes to the meta. And yes, there's always going to be established strongest decks. You know, for example, Modern will always have its Jund or something else, or it'll cycle through, and a healthy format should have a control deck, a combo deck, an aggro deck. Well, I'm a firm believer in the 4 archetypes. There should be a control based deck, there should be mid-range, aggro and control to rock, paper, scissors out the format. But if we're being honest here, the current state of Pioneer is that we have Rakdos, Green, Rat, and let's just, while I'm doing this, we'll look at it as we currently stand. If we go to the Explorer, the Pioneer metagame here, we currently have Rakdos midrange at, according to Goldfish, 12.5, 12.6% of the meta. Nikfos Ramp is another 12%. Then Rakdos Sacrifice, which is a slightly different Rakdos shell but still runs the same like Fortseas and all the disruptions, at another 8%. So you have 3 decks that take up a good third of the aggro, a third of the meta. And these are the decks that are also fully printed on Arena. Obviously there's some exceptions with sideboarding and a few individual pieces, but majority of these cards are online and these archetypes exist. Now, as a standard player, you come into this and go, wow, let's try this different format. And the first thing you run into is black-red that goes Fortive Harvester into Liliana into Shieldred, and it's pretty much a mirror of the current standard. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, that's going to be forever. I'm hoping that with the printing of Eldraine and a few other new sets moving forward, we'll see a cycling of the meta. It would have been way better as well, I think, if we could have had the 2-year rotation. the sudden increase to 3-year rotation makes standard decks more viable, which might make people go, yeah, I want to play standard. But I think that also hurts the rotation of people into Pioneer and other formats because, you know, for example, if Niv-Mizzet Reborn was in Standard, I played it in Standard, and then it got moved to Historic at the time, or Pioneer. I was like, oh, okay, well, it's not in Standard now, but I still want to play this because I really enjoy this archetype. I'll move my deck into another format and then build it from there. We're not going to see that transition as often now, obviously, with a 3-year Standard, unless we get to a point where a new set literally rips Standard apart and completely has to rebuild it, which I'm very doubtful with the current safe designing space that we're seeing currently with Wizards. That's my little rant on why I think people are not moving so much into Eternal formats. It's a combination of mirroring the same format. As I said, Standard and Explorer and Pioneer are pretty much dominated by mono black / Rakdos decks right now. And a longer rotation is just making it more viable to play your Standard decks for longer. Which ironically is kind of what Wizards want, because most of their money is generated from Standard. Because Eternal decks that don't have much change don't generate that much money. That's why they've turned Modern into the rotating format that it has now become. But if we look at the actual article that Wizards put out here, they basically spend the first paragraph going on about how they lack the current card pool and that they are looking to get it finished by 2025. That's what's scary to me. Early 2025, they want full Pioneer on the format. Now they're going to do this with Pioneer Masters and other, other historic / explorer anthologies that they're going to bring out. And they finish saying, currently Explorer fully supports a wide range of Pioneer archetypes. Yes, it supports the Rakdos base decks and the Mono Green deck and Rat Reanimator deck. And many more playable with some minor swaps with their usual cards. Yeah, I'm one of those people having to swap for Bring to Light because you don't put that on yet. They also announced they're going to bring out Tons of Tarkir, which means they're skipping the Battle for Zendikar sets, which is where Bring to Light is, which makes me even more infurious. But if we consider this to be the case, we got another year, and Wizards have said that they want to support Pioneer as a fully expanding, fully going off format. And I mean, for that to happen, we've got to see transition from Standard into Explorer and Pioneer. But I don't think that's going to happen unless we get a diverse range of decks currently that are different from Standard. As I've said before, the current power level of cards that we were printing, obviously with Shieldred, Fable the Mirror Breaker, they're not completely like meta warping like the Uros and the Okos that we had a few years ago. But they are so strong that they've established themselves firmly in these formats, and it has basically meant that these two formats are now mirrors of each other. If you play Standard, you'll run into Shieldred, and if you Explore, you'll run into a Shieldred shell. So honestly, what's the point of investing and moving to another format if you're just going to run into the same shell again? You might as well stay with the format you've got and keep playing that. Which is very sad to me, because that's how formats ultimately will die. As we said before though, I think that it's very promising for the future. As I say, I'm hopeful for the future. And I think that we might see definitely some shifts as soon as Standard rotates. I think people will try to bring archetypes into new Eternal formats. That's usually the way it goes. But as we said, a 3-year rotation makes that very, very tough right now. And yeah, we'll see where that ultimately does go. Aside from that, there's not a lot truly wrong, I think, with Explorer's mirroring of the Pioneer metagame. I mean, if you play Explorer on Arena, you're going to have a pretty close proximity to what is faced in an MTGO or your local game store. But as true as that is, we do need to work on fixing the damage that was done to Pioneer. I mean, literally, I think the combo year of Vass's Oracle, or like Pharos Beyond the Combo, as my friends were calling it, put a lot of damage on the format that still hasn't been addressed. I would also like to take this opportunity to address the people we often see complain about how Pioneer was a mistake coming in with everything unbanned and we just banned every week. Everyone goes, oh well, this was a huge problem. No, it wasn't. At the time, Pioneer was being played exclusively on Modo. The format had just been announced. No one had all the stuff to make paper decks. Sure, some people probably did out of the rush, but they literally had the highest play numbers. MTGO used that data as a huge experimental thing and were like, okay, this deck's too strong, let's cancel it. Well, not cancel it, let's nerf it. Let's nerf this. And they could afford to do that with bans every week. Now, do we have to go back to it? No, we don't have to go back to it. But, you know, I would like to see this experiment done more. I would like to see it done in Modern. I would like to see everything unbanned and Wizards just reban it over a period using Modo as the example. Just do an example of go from the data and just work it from there. Now, ultimately, we are not going to have that happen. There's a lot of stuff on that ban list that probably should stay, but there's a lot that shouldn't. But as I'm saying this before, that initial banning was not what did damage to Pioneer. What did damage to Pioneer was the minute they stopped doing the week-to-week maintenance was the same release as Pharos Beyond Death. And that's when they literally suddenly turned the thing into a free combo deck meta. And no word of a lie, I had more fun playing Modern in Hogak Summer and Eldrazi Winter than I did during that entire combo year of Pioneer. I don't even think it was a full year. But wow, did that drain the fun out of this format and make everyone literally just go back to Modern. Now, is there a way to come back to this? I think there might be. I think we have to abandon the whole 1 year, 1 ban philosophy that Wizards seems to have been taking here. I think that we need to go back to a review of the ban list every release now with, I mean every main release, because if we do it with every release that would be every other day the way Wizards has suddenly upped their game. But as I said, we need to address that Pioneer and Explorer are a struggling format. If you go on Modo, you can get a Modern game in the casual queue, just click and you'll have one in no more than a minute or two. Pioneer, you can go into that room sometimes and there's like 2 people in the entire sphere of that game playing that. There are more probably active games of Legacy than there are in the Pioneer queue. And I'm addressing that because if we're bringing Pioneer to Arena, yeah, that will help, definitely. But if this queue play by format list that Wizards releasing is true, there is something that we have to address. We probably have to shake up Explorer to make it different in some way to the current standard format, which honestly is probably not going to happen, because the only way to shake up the format would be to release new cards, and those new cards will have to go into standard and they'll have to be powerful, which will then just filter through like that. Honestly, I feel that we may just have to see some kind of bans, as we discussed in previous episode. Now, I hate to rag on bans all the time, but if predominantly 25% of your meta is a Rakdos shell that uses Fable of the Mirror Breaker, and if you now have literally every color of Devotion deck, but they all just use Karn to find a big dumb win colorless card, these are things we have to address. Now, I'm not saying that that's the right answer, and I'm sure there's plenty of really smart other ideas that I'm not even fathoming here while I'm just rambling on about the current state of things. But it is definitely a talking point that I think we need to address. We definitely need to look at the health of Pioneer. Now you might say we're not suffering like the Combo Winter, or Hogak Summer, or Eldrazi Winter. But we have to realise player numbers are down for this format. And we had a Pro Tour. And nobody I spoke to about who watched that Pro Tour kind of enjoyed it. And maybe it's just the nature of combo decks at high level. I don't know. I have no answer to that. Because it wasn't even Rakdos that won, but we did see Rakdos in the top and we saw green. I'm literally stumped for what to think here. We have a very long video here because this long Abzan Rat game went on for a very long time that we're currently in. But I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. Please let me know what you think down below. I'd be very interested in the thoughts of this. What would your ideas be to reignite Pioneer? You know, give us a shot in the arm, or a way to tempt standard players over to Explorer or Pioneer. Like, what is the missing ingredient? What's the little bit of spice that we need to just gull them over and get them hooked on the format? As I said before, I love this format. I don't want it to go anywhere. I still love Modern, even though I rant about it all the time. Part of the fun, I guess. I'm British, I'm allowed to complain and still enjoy something. But yes, I still love it, and I just want it to do better. So, what would your suggestions be, please? Enjoy the rest of the gameplay. We have a fun little match at the end where we basically run into a control player that seems to get really salty that we resolved the spell that they didn't counter and they just let it run. Well, they rope us, so you know, they just feel shame that they let a spell resolve and didn't quit. So yes, thank you for listening to this incoherent ramble. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know how you would fix Pioneer / Explorer. Let me know your thoughts below. Thanks for watching.